Good evening, everyone. Tewksbury Zoning Board of Appeals for January 30th, 2020 is in session. First item on the agenda, approval of the minutes from December 19th, 2019.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 19, 2019.
Motion has been made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. We're going to do the Kayla Sullivan first.
Kayla Sullivan on behalf of Kayla A. Sullivan and Mark D. Peck for variance from Section 4130, Appendix B, for front and side yard setbacks and a special permit under Section 3651 to increase the existing non-conforming structure of the Tewksbury zoning bylaws to construct a second story, construct a mudroom within the area of the existing carport, and replace front landing and stairs of the existing single-family home as shown on plans filed with this board. Said property is located at 7 Independence Avenue, Assessors Map 99, Lot 51, zoned residential.
Sit right up here.
Our attorney just went outside.
Grab a microphone and just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Kayla Sullivan.
Don't push the button.
Oh, my bad.
Address, please.
7 Independence Ave, Tewksbury.
Address, please.
7 Independence Ave.
Thank you. All right, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, please. Just make sure you're on the mic. You're waiting for this guy, aren't you?
Sorry about that. I figured we'd be waiting a while to get my water.
If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Certainly. Scott Durant, attorney at law, 5 Middlesex Ave, Wilmington, Mass.
All right, a little bit about what you're doing, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petitioners seek to add a second floor to the home, which sits on a parcel developed in the 1950s as part of a 41-home development. Bear with me a moment, I ran up the stairs. Petitioner's lot, along with the other 40 lots, is in the R40 zone, and none of the lots are currently conforming in terms of area, each being well under 1/2 acre. In reviewing the assessor's map, excuse me, in reviewing the assessor's maps and GIS mapping, the lots all appear to have some level of front setback issue under the current bylaw, whereas at the time of construction it appears they did not. Petitioners are Kayla Sullivan and Mark Peck. Kayla resides in the home with her husband Richard, who's next to me, and their young son, who's in the back. The plans were presented to the building inspector along with an application for building permit. In October, the building inspector denied the application and directed the applicants to seek a special permit from the board pursuant to Section 3651 and variances pursuant to Section 4130, Table of Dimensional Requirements, Appendix B of the bylaw, for both front and side yard setback issues. As originally constructed, the home was and is a single-family ranch with a carport extending towards the street. That appears to be the same as every other home in the development as originally built in the 1950s. Since that time, a review of the neighborhood shows that 20 of the 41 homes have had second floors added, the carport enclosed for living space, or both. The parcel is elevated from the street and sits at a curve in Independence Avenue. The home was constructed on the extreme right-hand northeasterly side of the parcel, and like the other homes, towards the front of the lot inside of the current setback requirement of 25 feet. The area of the plan that's been submitted to the board, shown as, quote, existing structure, was constructed in 1984, according to the records of the Tewksbury Building Department. When developing the neighborhood, the developer, Windward Homes, Inc., imposed restrictions on the installation of walls, fences, landscaping, etc., on corner lots such as this, in order to maintain sight lines for vehicles. Those restrictions, along with the topography of the parcel, may serve to explain the original siting of the home to the extreme right of the lot and the resulting current side yard encroachments. In terms of the front yard setback encroachment, it doesn't appear that any of the surrounding homes satisfy the current 25-foot requirement. In terms of the proposed construction, the owners wish to, as part of the second floor addition, construct a mudroom extending 6 feet into the existing carport and include a foyer and new front steps with landing at the entrance to the home as part of the reconfigured face of the home. The building permit was denied due to nonconformities in the form of existing side yard setbacks at 12.5 feet and 13.4 feet when the requirement is currently 15 feet, and an existing front yard setback of 22 feet. I thought you were in the back. And 20.8 feet when the requirement is 25 feet. As the board is aware, the board has authority to grant a special permit relative to a non-conforming structure under General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 3651 of the zoning bylaw of the town of Tewksbury, allowing, quote, reconstruction, extension, alteration, or change where it determines that the proposed modification will not be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming structure to the neighborhood. In terms of the special permit request, I respectfully suggest that this is the case with what has been proposed. In terms of requested variances, the non-conforming nature of the two side yard setbacks will not be increased by virtue of the addition, since the mudroom is proposed to be constructed within a portion of the existing carport. As mentioned, conversion of a portion of the carport to a mudroom is both in keeping with modifications made to numerous homes in the neighborhood and will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood than is the existing nonconformity in the form of the carport. Further, the side yard encroachments are greater than 10 feet, which is permissible under Section 3650, subsection 4 of the bylaw. In terms of the front yard setback, the nearest point of the proposed mudroom will be outside of the 25-foot current front yard setback requirement. In order for the second story to be constructed as proposed, the foyer will encroach into the front yard setback to no greater extent than does the current pre-existing non-conforming landing of the front steps, with the landing of the proposed new front steps being installed at 19.2 feet from the front lot line. In order for the house, as originally cited, to conform to the current setback requirements, the house itself would need to be moved back. In order to comply with the current side yard setback requirements, it would have to be moved to the left. Access to the home would likely be unmanageable, as the driveway is already significantly sloped. Based, therefore, upon the topography of the lot and the original siting of the home to the extreme northeasterly side of the lot, the petitioners are requesting variances under Section 4130, allowing a front yard setback of 19.2 feet for the front steps and allowing the existing side yard setbacks. The petitioners offer that the proposed addition is in harmony with improvements made to numerous homes in the neighborhood, that a strict enforcement of the current zoning bylaw would impose a hardship in the form of requiring the petitioners to relocate the home and the parcel, that the proposed addition will not be substantially more detrimental than is the existing non-conforming nature of the home, and that the granting of the requested relief will not substantially derogate from the purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw. If you'd entertain any questions.
Just a correction for you. You stated 4131, lots of 10,000 square feet or less may be reduced to 10 feet on each side. You don't qualify for that because you're 10,050.
As I read it, it wasn't applicable to the 10,000 or less. If it is, I stand corrected.
Okay. So you do need 15 for your side and 25 for your front.
Correct.
Okay, as long as we all understand. Same footprint? You're building the mudroom in the carport?
Correct.
Up.
Up. The only change in footprint would be the foyer coming under where the front steps currently are.
Okay. On your print, you have 19.2 feet.
Yes.
It looks like your red line is to the old steps. Is that correct?
Well, that's why we went with color, because I had the same struggle. It's to the new steps, the 19.2.
Okay. All right, so your new foyer is going to be 19 foot 2 from the street?
The
From your
steps
property line?
will be.
The steps are the furthest part?
Yeah, if you see the existing stairs,
Yep.
the foyer will fall on that. You can see the line going left to right, the green line.
Yep.
That's going to be the foyer, and the steps will extend from there.
Okay. Is this house on Town sewer, just septic?
Town sewer.
Good. And your second floor is gonna be what? I know I can flip through all these pages, but I'd rather you just tell me. What's on your second floor?
3 bedrooms and 2 baths.
What's on your first floor now? 1 bedroom?
3 bedrooms. Right now,
3 bedrooms on the first floor?
right now.
And you're taking the 3 bedrooms and just putting them upstairs?
Yep.
Board members?
The 19.2 feet, is that coming from where the foyer ends, or is that the bottom stair?
It's the bottom stair.
The bottom stair to the
Yes, sir.
street?
Where are you?
Is the proposed third floor the attic?
Yeah, it's an attic, but you would do walk up.
So what's the height? When all is said and done, what's going to be the height?
Need one moment to look at the plan.
I think it was among the first pages.
It's just so many pages, I figured it'd be easier to ask. There it is. It's not right on this picture, though.
We're on the application. "25 feet.
Anything else, board members?
I'm just going to compare it to the other houses on the road. That's why I'm doing Google, sorry.
So essentially, the only change compared to the existing structure is that front foyer and the stairwell. Is that
The only
correct?
footprint
And you're
change.
going up?
Yeah, footprint change, yes.
Where are you gonna have your driveway now? If you're taking your carport and making it your mudroom?
They'll stay there.
Same location, it's not going to be the entire carport. It's only going to come out 6 feet from the house, 6 feet into the carport,
So you're keeping the carport?
a partial portion of it.
Okay. Are you rebuilding the carport?
It'll depend on the condition of it once they get into it.
I guess I could have just flipped the page and saw that. That's the front view? That appears like the carport went away. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
And it's back. All right. Want to open it to the public?
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm good.
All right, being a public hearing, we'll open it to the public at this time. If anybody here would like to speak? No one? Okay. Seeing none. Any more questions, board members?
No.
Anything?
I have none.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
There was a letter from a neighbor in support. I believe the board received it. If not, I can provide it.
If you have 4 or 5 copies of it, I'd like to see it.
That I can't provide. I was just provided one copy. We were told that the abutter dropped it here.
We don't have it in our
Okay,
packet.
okay,
Not that I see. Yeah, I'd like to take one if you have one.
okay.
Yeah, it's not in here.
Thank you. All right. It's a letter from the resident at 5 Independence Ave. Director Butter,
Yep, right next door.
in favor. And they're unable to attend the hearing.
I read it.
Nothing else, board members?
No.
Someone want to make a motion to close both parts of the hearing?
I'd like to make a motion to close both parts of the hearing.
Motion's been made.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any discussion? Okay. If whoever makes the motion, we have to do, if I can find the agenda again, we have to do the special permit first. We'll do it as 2 separate motions.
$4130 is for the...
4130 is for the setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
3651.
It's for the second story, right?
3651 says it's not more detrimental than what's already there.
I'm just wondering how to read it from what's written here, that's all. No, I read that, I'm just from here.
I would read from here. Read the name. Start it here.
So is that?
Yep, just drop on the first one.
Just off the first line.
Drop that.
Yeah.
And then the second one would be this one.
Right, so this is one, that's two? No, this is one, that's two.
Special
That's a
permit.
special permit
Special
first.
permit first.
I would like to make a motion to approve a special permit for Kayla Sullivan, NEPAC, on behalf of Kayla A. Sullivan and Mark D. Peck for a special permit under Section 3651 to increase the existing non-conforming structure of the Tewksbury zoning bylaws to construct a second story, construct a mudroom within the area of the existing carport, and replace front landing and stairs of the existing single-family home as shown on plans filed with the board. Said property is located at 7 Independence Avenue, Assessors Map 99, Lot 51, zoned residential.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
It's good. It's morning.
I would like to make a motion to approve Kayla Sullivan D. Peck on behalf of Kayla A. Sullivan and Mark D. Peck for a variance from Section 4130, Appendix B, for front and side yard setbacks. Of the Tewksbury zoning bylaws. Said property is located on 7 Independence Ave, Assessors Map 99, Lot 51, zoned residential.
Okay. The only thing I didn't like about that is they need front yard too.
Well, it says it here. Front
does say
and
front,
side
yeah.
yard setbacks,
Okay.
yeah.
I missed
I
that.
read that.
Motion's made.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
You're all set.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, sorry.
This goes away. Actually, this whole thing.
This one's done. Here's this one.
Next item on the agenda, please.
Remand hearing regarding original application for David J. Plunkett Esquire on behalf of Garrett Barabee for variance from Section 4130, Appendix B of the Tewksbury zoning bylaws to construct a single-family residence. Application originally heard by this board on April 27, 2017. Said property is located at 67 Hood Road, Assessors Map 27, Lot 66, zoned residential.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, David Plunkett, representing the applicant Garrett Barabee, who is here with us tonight. Also with me tonight is Richard Cuco. And just as an initial introduction, this matter was before the board previously. There was a denial. It was appealed to Superior Court. And basically, we're back here on that application for rehearing on remand from the court. As a general introduction, reintroduction to the application, just a little explanation about the property itself. I have on the board first to take a look at is the subdivision plan that created this parcel of land. I don't know if you have any of the information from the original application, so I'll...
We have nothing.
Okay.
We have the minutes from our meeting. That was it.
Thank you, sir.
This one.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's just one up.
The locus parcel is a parcel of land that's on Hood Road and was created back with a subdivision plan back in the 1950s that created this area that was between Trull Road and Hood Road, with Clayclawn Lane dividing between, and Crest Avenue going from Clayclawn down to Hood Road. The parcel in question is this lot right here with frontage on Hood Road. Basically, the issue that has come up when a application was made for a building permit, the question was at the time of the implementation of the zoning, there was a common ownership with this parcel that was up on Clayclawn Lane. It has a limited area of connection, but it does connect to the property. And the question was, then, has did this lose its grandfathered rights because of the fact that it was in common ownership at that time. Issues that we're going to be addressing here today, a number of them, but if you look at the layout of this, Mr. Cuco is going to come up and explain and show on his plan of topography about how this was laid out, that there is a clear breaking point in the layout of the land in terms of significant differences between the elevation of the area that's up off Clayclawn Lane and the lot that's down on Hood Road. They're all fairly similar in size in this subdivision, and if you look at the tax map for that area, you'll see it's actually fairly faint, but you can see the lots, and there's an outline of houses on basically every lot other than this lot here. So it's the only lot that hasn't been built out. And, you know, the issue is then, okay, the lots as they exist are all these lots as single lots that have been built out. They all have a fairly symmetrical size and shape. And the only lot then that would have this very strange asymmetrical shape would be this lot 49, if it was deemed to be still part of this lot 15. As additional elements here, this was built upon back in, I believe it was 61, and the town issued a building permit for it. And so it came into a technical issue in terms of whether the owner that had the common ownership could have requested a special recognition by the selectmen that this remained as a separate parcel, not merged. That wasn't done, but it raises questions in terms of, based on the topography of this, that it could very well be assumed that there was a determination made that it wasn't necessary, because when you hear from Mr. Cuco, he's going to explain this significant change here, that it makes no sense that this would be part of that lot there. First off, of the minimal attachment, and secondly, because of this significant drop-off. When you stand up here on Clayclawn Lane and you look out, you don't see houses below. You see, if you look over, you can see the roof of the houses that are down on Hood Road. So it's not something that you would have a yard area flowing. It's a clear-cut delineation. Built out, makes sense, built out, makes sense, and it was set this way along this break line that, again, that Mr. Cuco will get into. Again, looking at the tax map, you know, again, if you take a look, it would be the only lot with this strange symmetry if, in fact, this was not deemed a separate lot, separate and apart from this lot 15. And the issue in regards to the potential of the build-out, I'll hand out the plot plans for it to show that this is not a non-substantial lot. This is a lot that's very much in keeping with every parcel around here. On the Hood Road side, they're a little bit larger than they are on the Clayclawn Lane side. It's over 18,000 square feet of land. So it's not something that you have this, you know, very small lot that somebody's trying to put a structure on that's totally out of place with the neighborhood. This is a lot that was created at the time that all the houses around here that are now built upon was created. So it'd be very much in harmony with it, because that's what the intent was. The intent was, when they did the subdivision plan, that each of these lots would be built upon, and they all have been built upon, other than this lot right here. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll just hand out the plot plans then.
Let me ask a question while you're doing that.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
The original subdivision was made when?
1953, I believe.
I know it's on here, we just can't read it.
Yep.
1953.
1953. It's dated July 6, 1953.
And you said the house on Cleghorn was built in 1961?
I believe that that's the time the town actually issued a building permit for that house, separate and apart from the other lot. May 5, 1961, the building permit was issued, separate from, just for that lot.
Wasn't this an issue with, it was the same owner for both parcels?
That's the issue that in 1961, when the house was issued the building permit, that it was owned in common, that Clayclawn Lane home and the Hood Road home was in common ownership. But the town did issue a building permit for that, separate and apart from the Hood Road locust property. And again, the question is, was there an avenue for them to go to get special recognition of that remaining a separate lot, and it wasn't done? Again, probably a very logical explanation would be the layout of the lots would indicate that it wasn't merged because of the physical barrier that's created. And again, Mr. Cuco will get into the details of that. Mr. Chairman, if I could right now, I'm just going to distribute the copies of the plot plan showing the potential build-out of the lot. The topo plans that's up there on the board that Mr. Cuco will then go into explanation on.
Question. How is the land recorded at the registry? Is it two separate lots? I mean, I don't want to be the one determining whether it's actually two separate lots. Not be our attorneys.
The question is, how is this recorded at the registry of deeds? As two separate lots or one lot?
It's been in separate ownership by deed since the 60s. The problem that we're dealing with is the question of, well, when the house was built in 61, it was in common ownership. But, there are separate, the owner of the parcel that's up here on Clayclawn Lane has had title transferred to it over the years since the build-out of that parcel, just for that lot. So the title has been separate, and that's the issue that we're dealing with, because the determination was at that crucial time period there was common ownership. And that's the issue that we're dealing with right now in terms of if that's deemed to have been still merged into this because of the common ownership. That common ownership, though, has not been a matter of record title since 1960s, because they conveyed out this lot. And it's been conveyed out, not this and that, it's been just this parcel here. The owner of this parcel has absolutely nothing to do with the applicant. Mr. Berreby has owned this parcel in his name alone since 2009. Prior to that, he took title from an entity that was owned by his mother. And she had owned that property going back to a period of time in which she acquired it as a result of a situation with monies owed by a prior owner, Mr. Chester Sullivan, and then she transferred it to another family member, and then it was transferred back. So it's been in Mr. Berreby's control individually since 2009. It's been controlled by an entity controlled by his mother for many years before that, and they've been paying, this is assessed as a taxable parcel, and they've been paying on it. Mr. Barabee has been taxed on this parcel here. I have with me his, he ran off his tax records for the past 10 years, and, he's up to date, he's paid all his taxes that are due to the town of Tewksbury. As far as record title goes, these haven't been connected since this was built in the 1960s.
So they're registered, they're registered with the state as two separate parcels. They're paying taxes in Tewksbury as two separate parcels.
Yes, yeah.
I'm trying to understand what's the question before us.
Well, unfortunately for Mr. Barabee's aspect, when he tries to get a building permit, they say, yeah, but you know what, back in 1961, this parcel was owned in common with that parcel, and even though it's been deeded out all over these years, the question arose whether that was still legally considered, common ownership, and therefore not deemed subject to the grandfathered provisions of the law. And that's why we're here today. And our argument is that, look, there's been no connection legally since this was built out. We say that there's been, that an explanation of why they might not have sought this special recognition by the selectmen back in the 1960s was because of the layout, that no one would expect that this could be considered to be part of these lots. And again, that's what Mr. Kuka will get into relative to the topography of these parcels. And then, in terms of the avenue of a variance, we say that we meet the criteria of the variance in terms of the fact that, we have a situation where without the ability to build on this lot has absolutely no value. Mr. Barabee and his family has had title to it for all these years. They've paid taxes on it, and it's clearly something that would not be, would not deviate from the intent of the zoning bylaws. The intent of the zoning bylaws is to create some sort of uniformity in an area, and to say that the one lot that hasn't been built upon would be a deviation from the goal of zoning to have uniformity in an area, it just doesn't hold. This would be nothing more than a build-out of a lot, just as every other lot on this plan has been built out. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll just hand out some more of these documents. So actually, at this time, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kuko, and he'll go over this, physical elements of the parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. When you look at the property that was subdivided back in 1953, you have to say that the logistics of the property is there's a 46-foot difference in elevation between Cleghorn and Hood Road. So obviously that's way too steep for development. So that's why, if you notice, all of the lots that front on Trull Road are exactly the same size. They go back 130 feet, 120 feet. These lots that come up in through here, same thing, all about 12,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, and the same thing along Cleghorn. Then you notice that there's a big change between where lots 47 through 55 are compared to, let's just say, lots 16 through 7. Because from the front part of Lot 49 to the back of Lot 49 is 26 feet. And then there's another 20 feet difference in elevation from the back of Lot 14 and 15 to Cleghorn Road. So that's the genesis of why these lots were divided the way they were. It's almost impractical or impossible to be able to access through this small avenue here to get down into this location. Just to give you an idea of the town, that translates out to be about, off the top of my head, about 20%. The town won't even allow a road above 8%. And in a parking lot or your driveway, you don't want anything more than 4% because the door in your car will slam closed on your leg. So you wouldn't be able to get a driveway through here from this lot to that lot. So basically what the map that Mr. Plunkett just handed out, that is my plan. Each one of these faint lines represents a 2-foot difference in elevation. So when you look at the area up here, you can see how far apart those lines are. So that isn't quite as steep. When you get into the area just at the rear of this lot and our lot, you can see how close the lines are in this location. So if you were standing up here, it would really plummet down quite a bit. Conversely, when you get on the other side of Hood Road, it even drops off even more. So that's why when, I'm sure when Dana Perkins was designing the subdivision back in the 50s, they ran the roads along the break in the topography so that each of these homes would be able to be constructed in a reasonable manner. And as you can see, all of the homes that front on Hood Road, they had to clear out this area in order to change the grade slightly in order to get these homes in here. So I took these off of, just to give you a relative idea of what the homes in the neighborhood, the sizes they are on the lot compared to our lot. And if you look at the proposed plot plan, the home that's shown on there is no greater in size than any of these in this that are existing in that area. So it's very, very, very difficult to be able to connect these two parcels from a grade point of view, topographically. So, any questions? I'll sit down in case you have them.
Give further, indication of how this translates in real life. This is shot from the roadway between this lot, this house, and that house. And you can't see anything behind it other than if you look to the corner here, this would be the roof of the house that's down here. Same thing, a shot from the other side of that house. You don't see anything because it's too, it's too far below it. Same thing in terms of, looking at it from Hood Road up. You can see the houses. This house, I believe, is, I'm trying to get I believe it's this house here. And you look at it, and you're looking up. There's the house up above it. It's up above. So it's not something that it's the backyard. It's, they're looking down at their rooftops, and the Hood Road is looking up at the other properties. So, Mr. Chairman, just in summation, I think that we laid out a situation where it's clear that this wouldn't derogate from the intent of zoning. This would be nothing more than allowing the build-out of a parcel of land that would be absolutely in conformity with all the other lots that have been built out, because it was created at the same time and with the same plan, with the same design of the layout of a subdivision, because they're all on the same plan. It's just this technical aspect that we're dealing with. But we say that, the variance is an avenue that allows us to get relief because of the fact it doesn't deviate from the intent of zoning. That it is a situation, if you look at the circumstances, this is something here that on two avenues. Only if you're saying this is deemed to be part of that other lot, even though it's not, not in common ownership, but it's deemed to be merged because of that common ownership back in 1961. That's the only lot. And that's the only lot that wouldn't be this symmetrical lot that all the others have had the advantage of building out on. It's also a situation, as Mr. Cuco explained. It makes no sense. They created that line because of the topography of it, and that this is down significantly lower than the other parcels, so it could not be deemed a part of that lot. That would be the only lot, so-called, that would have this type of variation. A 20-foot drop-off from the back of that parcel down to the other parcel. That would not make sense to have a lot of land that has that type of drop-off in the middle of the parcel. And also, the reality is, the way it's laid out, it has the frontage. It was made to have frontage on Hood Road. It wasn't intended to have frontage on Clayclawn Lane. It makes no sense that this would be something that would have frontage on Clayclawn Lane, nor vice versa. Would it make any sense that that house on Clayclawn Lane would have the frontage on Hood Road with that 20-foot drop-off at the back property line? It just makes no sense. And again, without the ability to build on it, it's owned separately and apart from that other parcel for all these years. Taxes are paid, but can't make use of it. So there's clearly and it's clear that the use was intended to be for the building of a house because it's part of this subdivision that everyone else accomplished that goal. Everyone got the fruit of that purpose. And this is the only house that doesn't have the ability to do so. So I think that it's clear that all the elements of the variance are met, and willing to take any questions you may have.
I have a couple of questions. If you don't remember, I have the luxury of, I was on the board the first time this came through.
Yes.
Nobody else was.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about the deed, right? So when the lot on Cleghorn was built out in 1961,
Correct.
they were deeded together, or they were deeded separately, and one person owned both of them?
They were owned by the original developer who sold the lot in 1961, which I believe was after he had built on it. And so he conveyed out, let me just get the...
Were they ever deeded together?
Up until the time in 1961 where the original developer conveyed out into the current separate chain of title that started with that break-off in 1961.
So from 1953 until 1961, they were deeded together?
They were together, correct.
They were deeded by the developer in his name?
He didn't buy individual lots, though.
No, he developed the developer subdivided the parcel, and then he deeded out lots. And at the time that he deeded out that lot, he also owned the lot on Hood Road, which created that common ownership aspect.
Were these the last two lots that went in the subdivision?
don't know that those are the last two lots that went in the subdivision. We have the titles for all the adjoining parcels, but, we didn't do the title for the entire subdivision, other than the fact that I think the assessor's map would show that, in fact, every lot was built upon. Whether some of them may also have been subject to, this type of issue, but I don't know. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to the locust property and the surrounding properties. The other lots were never in common ownership with this lot at that crucial zoning bylaw change date. So it's not an issue. It's not an issue with the lots on either side of it on Hood Road, nor is it an issue with the other lot on Clayclon Lane, with which it has a common boundary line, because the title rundowns on those adjoining lots show that there wasn't common ownership at that crucial time period of the zoning change.
What was that? 80, the zoning change?
56. 1956.
So, to recap, in 1961, there was common ownership between Lot 77 on Cleghorn and Lot 66 on Hood. Common ownership. Right? One person owned both lots.
Referencing their addresses, yes. Yeah.
So then in 1961, a building permit was issued to build out the Lot 77.
Let me just look at, before I start saying yes to numbers, let me just,
It would be the lot on Cleghorn?
Cleghorn, yep.
so, on the subdivision plan, it would be Lot 49 and Lot 15, but on the assessor's plan, yes, it's 77 and 66.
Okay, so in 1961, a building permit was issued for Lot 77.
On the assessor's
Do you
plan,
have
reference,
that building permit?
no,
Okay. But in 1961, it was two separate lots, but it was owned by the same person,
correct, by the developer,
by the developer.
yeah,
So then he sold off Lot 77
correct,
in 1961 after he built the house.
yes,
So now somebody else owns Lot 77,
correct.
whoever, someone
Yes.
else.
Yes.
And he sold that lot.
Correct,
And the developer still owns Lot 66 at this
Correct.
time in 1961.
yes.
You don't know, but why didn't he just build on the lot back then?
I don't, it could have been economic reasons, it could have been a build-out plan. I don't know
Do you
the,
know when Lot 65 and 67 were built out?
when they were actually built out, no, other than the fact that they wouldn't, that they weren't in common ownership at the time of this deadline for common ownership for the properties. We have,
At one time, the developer owned every lot.
yeah, the developer created this,
Right.
yeah, the
Why would
subdivision.
you leave one behind?
Yeah. But he would have conveyed out 1450 and 48, or on your assessor's map, 67, 65, and 76 prior to that deadline, because those lots aren't an issue.
And the deadline was 1956.
No, I believe the deadline was 1961. No.
56.
Fi-
It was just before 1961, it was 3 years after 56.
Okay.
So by 1960, the protection expired.
We have attorneys that rule us here, the town attorney. He knows a lot about this one.
Be interested to hear his opinion.
Would you give us your opinion, please?
I don't really have one, but
Well-
an overview.
The overview, please.
Where should I go?
Podium?
Do you want to come right here?
Podium?
Yeah.
It's an unusual situation. But before I start, I need to make a disclosure. When I came here this evening, I found out that in a butter is my niece's father-in-law. The relationship is so remote that I'm not disqualified under the conflict of interest law, but I want to make that disclosure.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Dugan, it may be helpful if I give an overview about certain things,
Yes, please.
which may explain how the town operates today. At the present time, since I've been town council, we have a different method of dealing with these undersized lots. That anyone who wants to build on a lot that has less than 150 foot of frontage and 1 acre of land has to file an application, what they call a small lot application. And that application gives us all of the titles of the property that they want to get a building permit for and all of the surrounding adjoining properties. When we review that application and the title, if we find that if at any point one lot is contiguous with another lot that was under the same ownership at one particular time, going back to 1956, the building department is instructed by my office that they cannot issue a building permit. The permit that was issued back in 1961 probably should not have been issued without there being a matter coming before the Zoning Board of Appeals. But at that time, people were unsophisticated, and they really didn't have a comprehensive idea about the concept of merger, for example, in which if you have two lots, even though they're on separate lots on a plan, and at some subsequent time, as here, it's owned by different people, there may or may not have been a merger over the years. So that, generally speaking, to some degree, contrary to what my brother, Attorney Plunkett, said, the concept of zoning is to do away with nonconformity as much as you can. Purpose of zoning is to create healthy atmospheres, more air, more space, if a town wants it. So it gives towns permission to have, for example, 1 acre or 2 acre zoning, if that's the purpose that they want. So the courts have, since a case back in 1963, said if you have a lot that adjoins another lot and you owned it and zoning has changed, as in this case, there may be a merger, and there generally is. But there can be circumstances, and it's up to them to show it, where there is no merger, that it was always intended to be separate. And there could be an example I would give. No case that says this, though. There's very few cases that are in there concerning where there's no merger. Generally speaking, the cases that go up, there's a merger. You could have a stream running through these two lots in which you can't really easily cross and so forth. There may have been a wall put up at one time before zoning changed it. People may have been paying taxes on the other lot as if it was a buildable lot. All those factors are there, but not simply paying taxes. Everybody pays taxes, but you pay taxes commensurate with your theory there's a separate buildable lot. But that's up to them to show, not to me, but that's a general overview. Now, the problem with this case, not to be critical, because over the years, the people that were involved were probably not sophisticated in land use. But I know Mr. Dugan has been through this before concerning an issue of merger and separate lots. What normally would happen is that you go to the building department with this undersized lot, and you apply for a building permit. The building commissioner says, file the application for a small lot, send to town council reviews it, says there's contiguous ownership at some particular point, can't issue a building permit. We are not, the building commissioner is not the fact finder as to streams running through the property, a cliff that's there, how taxes have been paid. They're not fact finders. He only looks at it from the point of view, was there contiguous property? Because the Zoning Act wants that once you have increased zoning, if you own an adjoining piece of property, and nothing else is being considered, nothing about streams or cliffs or anything, but you own an adjacent piece of property, the law wants you to have as legally possible a piece of land. So if you have two lots that are separate that equal 25,000 feet and you have square feet and you have zoning at 44,000 square feet, the law is keep that lot because it may be more desirable as a lot. But you may have a situation here where there's approximately only 30 feet in the back that's contiguous, and other factors, up to them to show you and convince you, not what I have to say here tonight. And it may have never been a merger. The problem is that when it goes to the building commissioner and he says, I'm not issuing a building permit, you people know, but you don't often do it. But Mr. Dugan has been involved in it on many occasions. You take an appeal to the ZBA. You disagree with the building commissioner that this is not a buildable lot. And you take an appeal to the ZBA and you show there was never a merger. And the building commissioner is not the finder of fact. You are, and you can make that decision. They applied for a variance. And a variance, you have to show a hardship. When you show a hardship, you have to show that you didn't create the hardship. And the other factors, which you people are quite familiar with in finding if you have a basis for a variance. Now, that's the way the case came before you. That's the way the case went up on appeal to the Superior Court. The record before the Superior Court, apparently I wasn't representing the town. Kevin Feely represented the town in that case. But apparently the record was insufficient, so they sent it back for another hearing. When it came back here, and I was asked to come in case there's any questions, this is a long overview, I'm sorry, to answer any questions, I have a problem, because that's not the route I would have taken. I would have taken the appeal to the ZBA. But having said all of that, I don't want to suggest that we make it any more complicated. So we'll treat this variance with, and I spoke with Attorney Plunkett about it, that we'll treat this variance as appropriate, and he shows you that before you come to a conclusion that these lots, in fact, never merged. Or you find that they did. It's up to you. But that's the overview. Way back then, just so you're aware, that when that building permit issued, it probably should not have. It should have gone through the process we just talked about. But under the law, once a building permit issues, that after 6 years, and that's when this became an issue, after 6 years, the town cannot take any action to remove that house. It's that house on that other lot in Cleghorn stays there. I think that's probably the overview I can give you. And if you have any questions, maybe what I've said opens up some better understanding or some questions on this issue.
So you said the zoning changed 1959, 1960?
Well, in 1956, zoning changed to 1 acre and 150 foot of frontage. But the general laws had a provision that if you had a subdivision and you had 3 years in which if you had lots that were contiguous but were undersized, you could deal with those undersized lots for a period of 3 years. So they gave some protection at that time for people that had
They gave a grace period.
a grace period, yeah. Now, and I think it probably would have expired, the 3 years would have expired before the operative date here in 1961. It would have been just before 1960. So that's really not relevant at the time. But at the time, in my view, I don't think Attorney Plunkett disagrees with me. At the time that the building permit issued, the requirement was 1 acre of zoning, 150 foot of frontage, unless the lot somehow was protected.
But in 1961, it would not have been protected.
Not by law, but the question again is one of merger. And as I indicated, that generally speaking, when you have lots that are contiguous to each other, there's a merger because the law wants you to have as large a lot as possible. But there can be circumstances whereby because of what people did, like putting up a fence or, and the payment of taxes, payment of certain taxes, and treating it as a separate lot, it may not have merged. But that's not for the building department to determine. That's for the ZBA to determine. But as I said, the concept, though, is not, because Attorney Plunkett said uniformity. That is an idea that you want to have a piece of property that develop that don't interfere or denigrate from other properties nearby or next to each other. But at the same time, the Zoning Act wants to create fresh air and other kinds of situations for people to enjoy the residential neighborhood they live in.
Any questions for Attorney Rules?
Thank you very much.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah?
When the home was built on lot 77, did they take into consideration the acreage of the two combined lots, or just?
Just that lot. In my view, it would have been just that lot. And that would not be unusual in this town back then. That you have to go back to 1961. It simply was not a period of time when there was that kind of sophistication in regard to zoning, for example, or how various departments operated back then. Things are very different in the past 50 years compared to early on. So I would say at that time, probably people didn't even think of that issue of merger at that time. And building commissioners at that time, building inspectors then, probably were quite unaware of zoning law.
Do you know if those were the last two parcels in that subdivision to be built on?
I don't know that they were the last, well, you mean the lot up on Clayclawn Lane? I can't tell you when each house was built out, other than at this point in time, all the lots as shown in that subdivision plan have been built upon, other than the locus that we're dealing with
The
today.
direction of my question is, The subdivision was created in 1953, right?
Yes.
Who was the owner of the subdivision again?
At the time it was created?
Yes.
Was the Claycorn Realty Trust.
Okay, so Cleghorn Realty Trust owns the whole subdivision in 1953, right?
Correct.
In 1956, we have a ZBA change. 3 years of grace, 1959, 1960, these are unbuildable lots, according to the current ZBA at that time. They're small lots,
ZBL, zoning bylaw.
ZBL. So now, the question is, in 1959, 1960, did lot 15 and 49, one being on Cleghorn, one being on Hood, were those two lots merged because the zoning bylaw had changed? With that theory, let's just move right next door. If lot 14 and 50 weren't built on, then those two should have merged. You can go right down the street and say all of those lots should have merged.
Yeah, I mean, correct. If they, and there's a possibility that if you do the title for every single lot on that subdivision plan, that there could have been other lots that were built upon the same as the lot on Claycorn Lane was built out. But for the, you know, for this parcel here, the specific attention is only to those that abut it. But, you know, I would say it's very possible. But again, going to our initial presentations, that, you know, you also have to look at the physical features of the parcel of land.
I understand all that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to figure out how this one lot, out of all the lots that are there, this one lot comes into question. Because it's not like I bought lot 15 and the zoning changed and I got stuck with lot 49 and I bought that one. This was the builder. This was the guy who owned the whole thing, is where we're saying the merge came from. That's the common ownership, correct?
Correct. And
The
then,
builder. He owned them all at one point. So why are we trying to say that this was the only one that got merged? So with that theory, every other lot in this development would have already been built out prior to 1960. Every single one of them.
For it to have fully complied with the technical aspect of the law, yes, every lot should have been built out prior to that point in time. The likelihood as to whether that occurred or not, I can't say conclusively because we haven't done the title on all the parcels, but I would say that there may be a very good possibility that that could have happened, yes.
And you understand what I'm saying, though, right?
Yes, yeah.
64 Hood was built in 52.
It doesn't make sense to me how this one lot got buddied up with lot 15, which has a cliff between them. I mean, I've been there. I walked the site in 2017, and I just don't get it.
I think that what it comes down to, Mr. Chairman, is just that the owners of that parcel didn't build on it until such time as, or didn't attempt to build on it until such time as this review became applicable. That there was more attention paid, I suppose, would be the best explanation of it.
Could I just interject two things?
Yes?
First, I meant to add a sentence to what I said. Mr. Dugan is aware of the practice with the building department. If, when I talked about an appeal and a variance, and I was here last time to answer questions on the variance, and at that time I told the board, when there is an appeal of a decision of the building commissioner, I generally appear here with the building commissioner, and we become an advocate for the building commissioner's decision. when there's a variance before you, unless administration says that there's a specific municipal interest in it and requests that I go there and represent administration, like the town manager, and usually the case, when we come here as the last time, we're not advocating for one side or the other. We're only here to answer questions that you might have. So I'm not being here, I'm not taking a position one way or another. That's your function to make that decision. But I will say that there were problems with this. But again, I go back that people were unsophisticated. One of the problems in the history of this case is there was a foreclosure, a bankruptcy at some particular point with some developer at that time, and people got involved, and rather than take the position about merger or no merger, they would file for a variance, that they were looking for a variance which the ZBA back then gave very liberally on undersized lots. But that all changed in the late 1980s, thereabouts, when the town became, again, more concerned about giving variances for undersized lots that weren't entitled to them. But so the history here is convoluted, that people really didn't, no one was doing what they should have been doing to make a clear case for whatever they were looking for.
Thank you. All right, any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, just I noticed I meant to hand out, the applicant has given me a printout of the fact that he has paid his taxes up to dates, and we have a list of all the taxes paid since 2009, I believe.
I'll take anything you want to give me. Thank you.
Thank you. Most of these houses, by looking, they were all 54, 52, 53, the years I'm getting on for all of the houses around here.
All right. Being a public hearing, at this time, we'll open it to the public. If somebody would like to come up and speak, please come to the podium. Give your name and address. Please. You're on.
My name is Paul Saunders. I live at 64 Hood Road, directly across the street from the lot we're speaking on. Of course, I cannot argue.
Hold that up there.
Okay. I cannot argue the realty laws, the bylaws in town. I think that was well done by the councilors. But what I can do is I can speak on behalf of my fellow neighbors who live on Hood Road and the abutters. And I can answer a few questions that seem to puzzle, especially the chairman of the committee. Why was this lot never built on? My family moved to Hood Road in 1953, and I was 6 years old, and my brother and I played in that land, in those woods, since then. And I can tell you that that land was so wet, we didn't even want to go there. So I think what I'm getting at here is that that was likely a wetland, but I'm not going to argue that it was not buildable because of a wetland, because it may not have been designated a wetland. But I think what is obvious to us is that nobody wanted to build on that land. And throughout these years, there's been a number of variances contested by Mr. Berube and his attorney. And each time, the consensus of the board has been that, no, I'm sorry, that this doesn't work. And so I won't argue the law, but I will argue what it means to us on Hood Road. And I'll give you a little history, okay? Regarding Mr. Berube's claim that the road, Hood Road, was built in such a manner that it would accommodate the hill up here so that it could be subdivided in such a way. Hood Road was built in 1902. At the bottom of Hood Road, there's a monument, a granite monument. It's a horse water trough. And on the monument is subscribed, C.I. Hood, 1902. And on the side of it, it's a monument about this big, granite, dug out the horses could water. On the side of the monument, Hood Road, 1902. The reason they built Hood Road was because if you're familiar with Andover Street, at the bottom of Hood Road, it goes up on a steep incline. And over on River Road, there's a steep incline. On River Road, Troll Brook goes through, and on Andover Street, Troll Brook goes through just before. The problem was that Mr. Hood, who owned a very large farm up where you may be familiar with St. Francis Seminary, he was and today would be a billionaire, back then probably a millionaire, and he owned herds of Jersey cows that were medal winners in the Chicago's World Fair. He also, I believe he was a philanthropist. He also had a factory down in Lowell near the end of the connector, the Lowell connector, next to what used to be Keith Academy, or at one time the local county jail. And I went to Keith Academy, and I would look out the window maybe too often, and I would see this huge tower, smoke tower, and it said Hood right on the side of it. So the horses that would like to deliver grain or whatever they did in those days, the horse-drawn vehicles couldn't get up River Road in the wintertime, understandably. And they couldn't get up Andover Street. Other horses, other commercial horse-drawn vehicles couldn't get up Andover Street. So they decided to build Hood Road in order for the traffic to get up to River Road, which takes you to Lawrence, and Andover Street that takes you to Andover. Now, I didn't know this until my brother told me. He's a surveyor. He couldn't make it tonight. He told me that he did a plot plan for me, and he told me that Hood Road is actually as wide as Andover Street. They intended Hood Road to build a trolley And as you can see, Hood Road comes up like this. This radius here is equal to this radius. So Mr. Hood needed to get his commerce up to and from his farm. And my guess is that he is the one that had the road built with the assistance of the state, probably, or the town. That's where Hood Road came from. So I lived there, and it was all that piece of property, that piece of land was always there. And the reason why is because nobody could build on it. It was too wet. Nobody wanted to take the chance of, and this part of the road, this Hood Road, on the Claycon side of Hood Road, there was a stone wall, and the stone wall was this high. We would climb up a little hill over the stone wall. Maybe it was that nobody wanted to take the expense of knocking down that hill and finding out that they couldn't pass a perk test, which, by the way, it seems they had tried it one time and failed. Now, I lived on Hood Road mostly all my life, and I wasn't here for the previous meetings, but I'm told by Mary, my neighbor Mary McLaughlin, and Deputy Joe LaFever, that this is not the second time. On the application in 2017, in question 7A and 7B, it said, "Is this your first application for a variance?" And the answer was yes. Well, that's not true. I believe that's not true. If I'm wrong, I will stand corrected. So here we are again. We've been here before. Nobody wants to build that land. Nobody wants that plot. Mr. Barabee is stuck with it. So here we are again. And here we are. We're not attorneys. But we have to somehow convince you and maybe Mr. Barabee that no, that land should not be built on. It was once a wetland, and it's still a wetland, although you can't, maybe it's not designated, there's no cat o' nine tails there. Now, throughout the whole thing, nobody has, from this side, has mentioned the word water. Water is a big deal on Hood Road.
Sir, can I interrupt you for a minute? The applicant is here. The applicant is here because this at one point was thought of as one parcel. Not water, not the trolley on Hood Street.
I understand that. I understand that. I understand I can't argue the law. But what I can do is present our case and a reason why we believe there should not be a building put on that property. So we have had water problems there for years and years and years. To put another foundation in there with a 1,000-square-foot roof and a driveway just exacerbates the problems we have. For you to live there, you'd know. So all of us here are here for a reason. It's not that we wouldn't like a beautiful home across the street from me or next across from Mary. Mary has a wet basement. She hasn't been able to build a family room. She hadn't been able to build equity in her home. Cindy Barco, that's on the other side, the same thing. Down the street, water's coming in, and we are the ones that have, through the years, had to repair our frontage. So that's what we're here, where we are here for. Now, Mr. Barabee said his reason for the variance was a hardship. Well, we have a hardship. We have a hardship of water, basements that can't be finished. And I think I heard Mr. Zerler say that who created the hardship? Well, maybe whoever went into that lot, knocked down that wall, knocked down the trees, couldn't pass a perk test, got denied, and a few years later...
Can I interrupt you for a second? Are you saying there was a wall on that lot?
Stone wall.
Where? On the lot in question?
Originally, as I pointed out, it was a stone wall all along.
Front of the lot or back of the lot?
Along the road, here's the road. Here's a hill that went up, probably from here, the stone wall's right there, stone wall that high.
Front of the lot?
Originally, when I was there.
Hood Street side?
Excuse me?
Hood Street side?
No, I call it Lakeside.
Excuse me?
The Hood Street side?
Yes, front of the lot. You live across the street from it?
Yes,
You climbed a 3-foot hill and climbed a wall
yes,
from Hood Street?
Where would the wall be? This is the,
right here. Here's Hood Road, right here, yeah, right along here
is the wall?
was a hill, big steep hill. They carved through here, they carved this road.
Where was the wall?
Where was the wall?
Where was the wall?
All right, let me do this again.
No.
Here's Hood Road. Here's Hood Road. You're walking up Hood Road, toward River Road. In 1953, on the side of the road, there is a hill. And along the top of the hill is a stone wall. And we would go up the hill, climb over the stone wall, and play in the mud.
In that lot?
Excuse me?
In that lot?
In that lot, yes.
So the lot was on the Hood Street side? I mean, the wall was on the Hood Street side?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
didn't understand what you meant, sorry. So, at some point in time, somebody knocked that down, went in, and knocked down a bunch of trees, and I'm going to say that was in the,
What year was that?
I'm going to say in the 80s. And, well, the late 80s, maybe early 90s. Most early 90s, I would say. Now, in 1993, Mary told me that Mr. Barabee and his mother knocked on her door and asked her if she would like to buy that piece of property for $10,000. And Mary said, no. No, why would I want to buy that piece of property? You know, it's soaking wet, I can't do anything with it. Not too long after that, Mary saw a truck pull up, and remarkably, she told me the name of the truck, DeCarlos. Maybe we remember that. And he was dumping gravel into that lot. And Joe told me that he saw it too. And he came out of the house and walked over there
And asked the guy what he was doing.
asking, what are you, we thought it was somebody just dumping garbage. So the truck took off at a high rate of speed, as Mary told me, very suspicious. She went down to the town hall and she said, what's going on? Is somebody trying to build a home there? And they told her, no, don't worry about it, Miss McLaughlin. They'll never pass a perk test there. It's just too wet. So nobody built on that property because nobody could. That's why it's been empty all these years. Mr. Barabee is still trying to build on that property. Now, but not to get away from the point that it's bad enough on Hood Road with the water we have. It cost me hundreds of dollars to fix the front of my lawn at the frontage of my home. Joe had to do his. And somebody put a home right in behind Joe. Joe's on the other side of, Joe's on my side of the street. He's my next door neighbor. Next to him was a town farm lane that went into our backyards. There was a small farm back there, maybe 2 acres. We tried to play ball back there. We couldn't play ball. It was all furrowed out for corn or whatever. The neighbor behind Joe had a gambling problem, but he knew somebody from the town council who said, you subdivide that plot and I'll buy it from you and you can pay your mortgage. They stuck a house in the back of Joe's yard. They used the town farm road as egress to the house. When the house was built, it was supposed to face, was it supposed to face Joe's backyard? Joe now has a neighbor, okay? Here's the neighbor's house, right here, okay? Here's a picket fence, right here. It's supposed to be 15 feet. It was 15 feet down here, but when it got down this far, it's like 10 feet. Joe used to go out the back of his deck and have a cup of coffee with his wife and watch the sun go down. Not anymore. Now he's out there looking at the neighbor, staring into the neighbor's living room. The reason I bring this up is because builders will come in and they'll build anywhere. Okay, now, not to get away from the point of the water. The water is a problem. It's costing us money. The water comes rushing down. Not only does it erode your frontage, I had to have the connection to the sewer done over. Joe had to have the connection to his sewer done over. The people behind Joe had to have the connection to their sewer done over. And I don't know how many more down the street. The water is a problem. We don't need more of that at our expense. The hardship is on us. It's not on Mr. Barabee. I took some photos of Hood Road, across the street from Hood Road, to give you an idea of how steep and what that land looks like. We didn't talk about what the land looked like. We talked about boundaries. We didn't talk about water. And another thing that I should mention, my brother, the surveyor, he told me that he thinks that property was purposely left there, or it came about to be this way as a swale for the water to come down that hill. And it would funnel down into that little piece of property and out, rather than wash away the side yards of the other buildings. He's a registered surveyor. My older brother's an architect. And they told me that would be ridiculous to put a house in there. So that's my opinion of why nobody's ever built there, and my opinion why nobody should ever build there.
the applicant? Yeah, he can have mine, I'll share. He can have mine, I'll share. Thank you. Anything else, sir? Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you.
It's better than I.
Anyone else like to speak?
Give these to Melissa.
If you could, sir, your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Eugene Weitz. My address is 39 Hood Road.
79, you said?
39.
39.
Yep. I've lived on Hood Road for 54 years. I currently own the house that I was born in. The piece of property that we're referring to has always been vacant, and as my neighbor had mentioned, it was an area that I never played in because it was so wet. The piece of property from this wall here is probably about to here. I never played there because once it's, it is wet, but I always felt like I was in my neighbor's yard, meaning Mary McLaughlin and Cindy Bacco's yard. So for me, I never bothered to go into this property. For me to even play in as a kid was useless. So to put a house in, and now to hear that it's, maybe I'm confused, but it seems like on record, it's 2 different owners. So now, for me looking at it, it's the piece of property, or the lot, is even smaller than I originally thought as I walk up the street and look. If to put a house there, you would have to have the front door and the back door facing each neighbor. And for myself, if this piece of property was next to me, I would not want a house being put there. Thank you.
Can I just make a point to your point before you walk away? So the issue is that it's believed that it was joined with a lot on Cleghorn. That's the issue.
Okay.
It's always been a lot, and it's almost the same size as every other lot on that street. You have .42 acres. The lot next to it is .44. The lot next to it is .45. The lot next to it the other way is .55. The lot on Cleghorn is .28. The lot up the back, like the attorney said, as you come down the hill from Trull, they get bigger. Just a point of reference.
Right. So if you're looking at Hood Road and you're standing in front of the piece of,
Point to that map for me, because the bigger lot in green is the one we're talking about.
This one here?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. So if you're standing in front of this lot on Hood Road.
The other way, yep.
Yeah, oh, so
Right
Hood
there.
Road's here, you're looking
Yep.
this way, up at the lot. You're looking at a piece of property from here to here. Absolutely, but it's longer and goes up to Crest Road, or Crest Road this way.
Same width as the property that's right next to it.
It's not. Go there and stand in front of it. It is definitely not. It's such a small area coming across that you could not put a house this way like every other house on the street.
It's 100 feet
You
on
have to
Hood.
put it this way.
It's 100 feet on Hood Road.
That's my point. You cannot put that house, even if I have a small house, 1,200 square feet, say a ranch. You cannot put a house going the same direction as every other house on that street. Even on the design that I saw, the house is going to be facing towards Crest Road. So it's going to look completely different than every other house on that street. And
I respectfully disagree with you. Okay.
Do you have that? Well, maybe it's changed, but this is what was, what everybody was looking at putting in 2017.
If you're going to speak, sir, I'd have to ask you to come back to the microphone, please.
Maybe I'm mistaken.
On the microphone, please, sir.
This, what I have here, was presented in 2017. And the way that it looks on the design that they show in this pamphlet, to me, it looks like the house would not be facing in the same direction every other house is.
How much frontage is on Hood Road?
That I don't know.
Doesn't show it?
Pardon me? I didn't study this, I'm just looking at the pictures, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
But from what I see here, from a visual standpoint, it looks like the house would be going straight up to Crest Road, not in the same direction that everyone else is. So am I mistaken?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there were design plans, I'll submit these, just to give an idea of the type of house which would be totally in unison and compatible with the other houses in the neighborhood. If you look at the subdivision plan, 100 feet, 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 101, then looks going up the other direction, 124 and 126, but the bulk of them are 100 feet.
Do you have any more copies of this? Because I think it would be helpful for the people to see what was proposed.
Just a point of information, Mr. Chairman, when those lots were created in '53, there was still zoning, and they had to have 100 feet of frontage.
Anybody else like to get up and speak? No? Anything else, board members?
No, thank you.
Is this a split?
I mean, that was a concept plan. You're talking a split? Yeah, so it'd be something that would be in keeping with all the houses. This was just to give an idea of the type of structure that would situate very nicely on that parcel in line with the plot plan that was submitted and given out previously.
You stated that this is conceptual, but you're also stating that you're building a house that's similar to all the existing houses currently, right?
Yeah, it was the idea to show that there would be something there that'd be very nice and in keeping with the neighborhood.
The neighborhood, are they all capes?
I think that you
Yeah.
have splits
For the
and
most part.
different, yeah.
Some
Cape and
ranches,
splits,
Yeah.
a
yeah.
little of everything.
But,
They're
you know,
not very big on.
Bottom line is, I think the intent was to show that this is not something that was going to try to overpower the lot and be something that, if someone tries to put a McMansion in a small, in a neighborhood that it wouldn't be compatible with that. So this would be very much compatible with that. Mr. Chairman, relative to the water issues, again, those are issues that would be part of, building and development and would be required to have compliance with whatever all rules and regulations is promulgated by the town to address such such issues. And really isn't the matter before us today relative to that. There was no intent to build, people are making conjecture over things that it hadn't been built upon, but Mr. Barabee owns it, he's been maintaining it. And again, the issue about Hood Road, I think, just to clarify, when Mr. Cuco gave his presentation, he was saying that this was the development of a parcel of land between Trull Road and Hood Road. He didn't say that, this created Hood Road, but that this was a development of that parcel, and that parcel dictated how this was, how this was designed. And again, it's clear from the topography, and everyone, actually, even some of these pictures, I think it's probably clearer than maybe what we presented, that you're there and it's way up. You're talking about a wall. It's in reality, that drop off is 20 feet, is for all intents and purposes a wall. If you've been there, you go there and you take a look at these pictures and, here's Hood Road. And there's Clayclawn Lane up there. And that's why, as Mr. Cuco indicated, why the lots on Clayclawn are smaller than the lots on Hood, because that's where the break was. That's where the break was. And that's what everyone was talking about. It was a big hill, and they put Hood up there because Andover goes straight up, and this was more of an incline. So they divided that parcel between Trull and Hood, and the physical features of the land dictated how it was designed.
I have a question for you, Attorney Zaroulis, if you don't mind. Would our determination tonight be whether the parcels were merged, or should we be looking at a variance?
Well, as I said earlier, and I explained this to Attorney Plunkett, I think before, it should have been an appeal as opposed to a variance. But not to make things more complicated, I suggested that this be treated, because you have a variance before you, that you sort of treat part of the variance as to making a determination whether or not there was a merger or not. Because that is the crucial issue before you.
Right.
Not the typical variance issue about a hardship.
I agree with
But
that.
whether or not there was a variance. So it's been complicated because of the type of matter that is before you, a variance. So rather than go through this whole thing all over again where it's in court, I took the position of practicality, that not to say to you, you can't hear this because that's not the way it should go, but to treat it as if it was an appeal, but it's a variance. But before you come to the conclusion as to hardship and does it derogate from the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, to make a determination whether or not there was a merger. And I think Attorney Plunkett agrees with that principle.
Yes, we have had discussion. We thought that the practicality of this forum tonight would be to address it as it's presented to the board as a request for a variance, but clearly from the presentation that we say that the standards of granting of a variance is that for all intents and purposes, this never should have been deemed to have been merged because of the nature of the physical layout of this parcel, which dictated the division of the land in that subdivision.
Right, but it was deemed as merged. Whether it should or it shouldn't have.
That determination triggered the process that led us to here today, yes.
It was. So why are we here for 4130 now?
Because if we deem that it's a separate lot,
Yeah.
they need a variance to build on it, because now it's too small. In 1950, it was fine to build on.
So,
And the frontage.
based on the discussion,
Yeah.
the first part of that is to deem whether or not we believe it was correctly considered as merged or not, and then to go from there to vote on the variance,
Yes,
if necessary.
yes. Yes. And it all boils down to, when the subdivision was put together, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I understand it. It's the second time I've heard it. I've sidewalked it, I've investigated it, I've pulled deeds up. So originally, a developer owned all of it.
Right.
Started building, right? 1953, started building. In 1961, he pulled a permit for Lot 15 on Cleghorn and was granted a permit, which he probably shouldn't have been granted, because by that time zoning had changed.
Right.
So when zoning changes, because the developer still owned two lots that were touching, even though they were only touching by 30 feet,
Right.
the town and the courts and everyone said, well, that has to be one lot now, even though it was only joined by 30 feet.
But there are stipulations to that too. So if there were natural boundaries like streams or fences, and in this case, I think it's reasonable to argue that the natural elevation that occurred between those, I would see that no different than the boundary of a stream.
That's why I was asking.
I'm looking at the development plan that was built, that was laid out in the 50s,
Yep.
that defined these lots as separate lots. That was the intention. So I don't think that it should be considered as merged property. That's my opinion.
Well, we can definitely vote on that, because that's the whole underlying issue. I mean, if this got built out back then, it would have been built, just like every other lot.
But now the law is different. Now the laws are different.
No, the laws are different. Well, they were different in 1960. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think just, in conclusion, that I believe that we presented sufficient information to show that, that this does warrant the requested variance from this board here tonight. I think a lot of points came up about, in terms of, other parcels, might they have been in the same situation had the oversight been addressed at that time. But, this is a single lot, the only one that remains, and I don't think you have to give weight only to the fact that Mr. Berreby is here to build on the lot. So whatever conjecture is that he had no intent to build on the lot is no bearing. The issue is relative to issues that will be addressed by the town in other aspects. The only issue is what is before the board. And this is clear that this property you've been there, you see it, it's like a wall. And that we would say that, I would still say even under the issue of solely a variance, you say the topography is that this would be unique for this parcel, if this is the only parcel that's deemed to be that merged parcel. You have this unique situation that since 1961, these lots have not been owned once the Claycorn Lane parcel is built out, it's continued in separate ownership over these years. So now you have a lot that's on a plan that was laid out, built out, and it makes sense why they did it this way, and that no one would expect that there to be a 20-foot drop from your back of your yard into the rest of your yard over a 30-foot wide connection. That doesn't make any sense, and that in fact is a barrier as any barrier you can think about, fences, streams, walls, anything that you want. That's as clear-cut a barrier between these two parcels as can exist.
All right, so here are our choices. If we close both parts of the hearing, we're voting. If we want to do site walks, if we want to go look at it, anything, we have to continue.
Need a sidewalk. But if anybody else does, I understand that.
I do.
I drive by there all the time.
Okay. So if somebody would like to make a motion to close both parts of the hearing.
Make a motion to close both parts of the hearing?
Motion has been made.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So now, we're going to have a little discussion on whether we think it's merged or not merged. I think, and I thought this 3 years ago, that it should have never been merged. Never even thought about being merged.
I agree.
I agree.
And it's a lot that should have been built. It just happened to be owned by the developer. It's not even,
Which is the common ownership that we're talking about.
the
Prior
developer
to-
was the common owner. And he just got caught in a bad time where zoning changed. And you can say, well, that lot didn't get built because it was wet. Well, then why didn't the one on Claiborne get built? Right?
The one next door?
It's not something that I'm authoritative enough to consider that. And that's why they're gonna have, the whole process of going through the building. Somebody's gonna have to do the actual perk test to say, can it be built on? They're gonna have to, evaluate that property. That's separate from me.
That's why I don't like that we're voting on a variance and not the fact of whether it's merged or not merged. It should have came as an appeal, but it didn't, and here we are.
That's not even listed, though. That we're here for this.
It's not, but we have to make that determination.
Oh,
In our discussion, we have to make that determination. Because if we think it was merged, then we
No.
can't vote on a variance.
I don't think it was merged.
I don't think it was merged. I don't think it should have been merged.
No. But I'm not quick to approve that either.
That's what's been
That's my problem.
given to us.
Right, I agree that it was not. I don't agree with this, though. I'm not. This. Not without it being surveyed and looked at. I'm not comfortable voting on that without the building inspector or any of that, because now we're saying, go ahead and do it. Do you see my dilemma? Because the building inspector won't look at it because it wasn't deemed its own lot. Right? Because it was considered merged.
So this is the proposed plot plan.
Right, but the building inspector hasn't even looked or been there because he wasn't. So it's coming to us now to approve this.
Yes, attorneys and rulers.
No, Mike.
Oh, you have to speak into the mic.
I just want to remind the board that this is a remand case, which means there may be the necessity of reporting back to the court what the reasons, because it was sent back here because there weren't sufficient reasons. Your secretary can't hear what you're saying for reasons. So and I don't think because I haven't seen it, that council has prepared a proposed decision. So I think Attorney Kevin Feely may want to have something to look at that has all the reasons why you're making your decision.
So my question
Talk to the mic.
Yeah.
Talk
if
to
we
the mic.
determine that we don't feel the property is identified as merged, then it changes the category of the property so that the building inspector can in fact review a permit.
Well, that's not exactly what I think, because you have a variance here. If it wasn't appealed, what you're saying is correct. You'd make a decision that he was wrong, and he could take it to the Superior Court, or he could issue a permit. I don't want to confuse you. So far, what you've done is, in my view, is correct. You've made a decision, but it should be clear on the record, you've made a decision that there was no merger.
Right.
Then you've got to go to your next step, or the elements defined for a variance and the reasons for it. What the hardship is, I'm not going to do the work of the applicant in this case, but you want to have your record clear as to what's happening here.
But if we approve this variance, the building inspector and none of that happens, right?
Stop.
If you
They still have to pull a permit.
approve the variance, the building inspector is going to treat it, unless someone takes an appeal, is going to treat it as a basis, and I'm not going to speak from here, but generally speaking, he would grant a building permit because a variance is issued.
I guess what I
So
want to make
he's
sure
gonna
is
approve
that
it because
the,
we've approved it.
the question that I have on the variance is only for the frontage.
No, I don't know what the variance is for.
Right.
It's the size, the lot size, 4130.
4130.
That's the lot size.
I think it's an area variance.
So, again, I agree it wasn't merged. My concern is that moving forward, we approve this, and it's not, really, other than pulling a permit to do the work, he's not gonna deny it because we approved it. That's my concern.
I think for the first part, for the record, I believe it wasn't merged, so.
Right. For the record, it wasn't merged, both for myself and for Ray
Me too.
and Ron. I'm speaking for you. But I'm not comfortable approving the rest of it.
All we can do at this point, because we've closed both parts of the hearing, all we can do now is put it to a vote.
Sure.
That's all we can do.
But how are we voting on this? That, are we making it two separate votes? Or two separate?
No, whether it was merged or not was a discussion.
It was just the discussion?
It's not, we're not asked to vote on that.
Okay, that's fine.
What they were hoping for is if we determined that the property wasn't merged,
Right,
then they need a variance to build on it. So
Right.
by granting the variance, we're saying that the property wasn't merged. But we've already voiced that we don't think it was merged. But now we vote on the variance.
So my question is, what is the question on as it's written, it says both the lot area and frontage. So the frontage is less than, it's 100 feet rather than
Well, now it's-
150 feet, right?
You need a 1 acre lot, 150 feet of frontage. They don't have an acre lot, and they don't have 150 feet of frontage.
I'm going to interject myself, and I think it's up to Attorney Plunkett to address the issue because he filed for the variance. And the question is that if you find that there was no merger, keeping in mind this is a case in court, and then you find that you don't want to grant a variance for the area, the next question is, if there was no merger, isn't this a lot that is a pre-existing non-conforming lot? And they can get a building permit on it. Because if you have a lot that has never merged, in other words, it's a separate lot, all it needs is 5,000 square feet, 50 foot of frontage, and you're entitled to a building permit. But the thing has now become convoluted because you have an application for a variance. I'm not going to get involved in that issue. That's up to someone else to deal with. But I just want to remind you, and someone's going to deal with the issue, that there was a vote taken and we don't feel there was a merger. And then if there's not 3 votes for a variance, where are you going to be tomorrow? That's for him to deal with, because the other ones that applied for a variance.
Yeah. Can I speak, or is that?
You ask him.
You can speak. I'll allow it.
All right. So we have a situation where the determination of whether it was a merger or not a merger is part of the discussion relative to a request for a variance. One of the elements in which you can address the issue as to whether a variance is appropriate or not is whether there is something unique to the parcel that's related to the topography of the land. And if in fact the discussion relative to the thought that there was no merger here is because the reality is you effectively had, because of the topography of the site, the effect of a wall between the lot up on Clayclawn Lane and the lot that fronts on Hood Road. So the thought was that we're now here on remand from Superior Court in order to try to get a resolution of the case. That I would say that if the determination of no merger, which in and of itself in another scenario would be the end of the discussion, does not in and of itself end the discussion on the matter that's before the board here tonight, because of the fact that that discussion pertains to a very specific cause of allowance for the grant of a variance. And that, you know, and then we address the other issues relative to the, the hardship would be clear that without the ability to build, then this land is not, it does not have the value that it would have otherwise. And that relative to the other element pertaining to the ability to grant without deviation from the intent of the zoning wouldn't have an adverse effect on the neighborhood. Again, clearly, as we set forth, if you look at that plan, every lot has been built upon. This would be nothing more than a lot that's been built upon as every other house that's there has been built upon. So I think that we could still meet all the 3 prongs of the variance in order to address the matter that has been sent back from Superior Court, which generally what you're looking for is there a means of resolution? And I would say that that would be the means of resolution before the board here tonight.
Well, Attorney Plunkett, the remand is for further discussion. I don't think that the court would ever use that word to a board.
Would say what?
I don't think the court would ever use the word resolution to a board when it sends it back.
No, but I'm talking about litigation in general.
It's for further reasons, one way or another.
Yeah.
So I think probably the only thing the board can do is take a vote on the variance, and there may be problems because of that. But
Thank you. So we're right back where we started. We have to put it to a vote. Because we've closed both parts of the hearing. There's no change in it. We've made a determination that we believe that there was no merger. And now we have to put the variance to a vote. we can discuss it. But that's where we're at. And then, I was looking at the notes.
Yeah, I read the notes earlier.
In 2017, they were looking for the exact same thing. That's probably why it came back this way.
I don't know, what's your thoughts?
I don't like that they're here for a variance. That's my thought,
Yeah.
but that's what they're here for. And I believe now that we've determined that the lot was never merged, which I thought back in 2017 as well. I thought the exact same thing. It's a buildable lot. By right, it's a buildable lot. And I think the owner of the lot shouldn't be denied their right to build on their lot. Because it's been caught up in a 30-foot merge.
Yeah, but my question is, why didn't they build with them when all the houses were built at the same time?
Well,
What
here's,
was the reason?
this is where I go with that, because that bothered me too. Let's go back to my paper with all the years. So it was developed in 1953, right? This whole
Yeah.
area was developed in 1953. This one house right here didn't get built till 1961, right? Which isn't that long, right? 'Cause you figure back then, this was way out in the country, nobody lived up here. So this one got built in 1961. How many of these other ones, and this is why I asked the question, how many of these other ones were not built before 1959? Because that's when the zoning changed. It changed in 1956. There was a 3-year grace period, bringing us to 1959. So that was a buildable lot. When this was all designed,
But
that
didn't
was a
the owner
buildable lot.
of these two own all of this?
Every single one of them, at one point, yep.
So why all these were built in 50s and that one?
This one and that one.
Right.
These two
Why?
weren't built.
Are we making this harder than it needs to be?
Yeah.
If it's a non-conforming, if we consider it without the merger as a non-conforming lot, it doesn't need the variance.
It does,
It does need the variance.
because the laws have changed.
I agree with you. But
The
they've
laws
asked,
have changed.
but they've asked us for a variance. No, it's pre-existing non-conforming. The lot
There
is,
was nothing on there.
the lot
So
is
there's
never,
nothing conforming in the house.
it's a lot. It's a pre-existing non-conforming lot.
The lot itself, not
The
a
lot
structure.
itself, but there's
The
no
lot-
structure
The
on it.
lot itself, since we've deemed that it wasn't merged, the lot is now a lot, and it's been a lot.
So does granting a variance give it any more benefit than not having a variance?
In my opinion, no. Except it's another legal hangup for them.
Not if it's granted, right?
If it's granted, he's fine.
So, in my opinion, if I consider it to be not merged, which makes it a pre-existing non-conforming lot and buildable, approving a variance that has no real greater benefit to the applicant than just treating it as the non-conforming lot, it's no harm. It's no harm to anybody else because it's a pre-existing non-conforming lot. It just makes that, we make that legal hurdle to make it move forward for the applicant. Because where we're stuck is limbo, because it really doesn't need a variance, but they're asking for a variance.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I vote to approve the variance.
So if we approve it, they still have to do the wetlands, test the wetlands.
Oh, they have to do all of that?
Right,
Yeah, they still have to get a building permit.
and all that will be tested, and that's almost free. We've already approved the law.
Well,
That's my concern.
they've given us this. Right? So this is what we have to base a variance on. And he's 20 feet from the sideline. Good. 50. Good. It's this and that. So you would offer a variance on the acreage and the frontage. Because he's good there, good there. I assume with no number here, he's good there.
Taxes on a lot.
Because
That
our
he can't build
determination that it is not a merged property is a determination to be used for the consideration of the variance. We
Right.
can't give him a
Half.
statement that
I
says
know.
this is a non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming lot because we don't consider it merged. It's not what we can, it's not in our purview. We can only use that information towards the variance. So in order to give him that relief, we have to give him the variance, if that's what we consider
No.
it to be.
No. We've made a determination that we don't think the lot was merged.
That's all we
We've made that determination on the record. That's why attorneys rule us as to talk into the mic.
Okay.
So that's already on the record. So now the variance, in my opinion, is completely separate.
Correct.
Goes around in a circle because it's, the variance is not necessary.
It- Yep. Yep.
We should have saved the happy baby one for last because I feel drained now.
If it was never non-conforming, why is it paying taxes on it? I mean, if it was never merged. Land that should
Right. If it was merged, then
Why?
the guy on
Claycorn.
Claycorn
Oh,
would be paying the taxes. And there's a lot of history on the land.
Not too much history on that land. Okay. You can make the motion. It's all you, my friend.
Make a motion in the remand hearing for David J. Plunkett Esquire on behalf of Garrett Baruch regarding the original application for a variance from Section 4130, Appendix B, for lot area and frontage of the Tewksbury zoning bylaw to construct a single-family residence. Application originally heard by this board April 27, 2017. Said property is located at 67 Hood Road, Assessors Map 27, Lot 66, zoned residential.
Second?
Did you say whether it was to approve?
All motions are made in the approval, right?
It was to, okay, yes, I didn't hear that part.
I didn't either.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
2 in favor, 1 opposed.
Still not comfortable with it.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
The motion did not carry
What's that?
for the audience. It didn't carry. 2 in favor, 1 opposed
For,
for the variance.
so it did not carry.
It did not carry.
2 in favor, 1 opposed.
If there's one opposing, it doesn't carry.
For the record, I think I know why you're confused. You said yes.
I said no.
No.
She said aye to when I said opposed.
She opposed.
Thank you, attorneys Aroulas.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
We're not done yet.
Did you tell them it was
I know.
closed?
I just have to stand.
Any old business? Any new business? Our meeting is still in session. If you could be quiet, please. Thank you. Any old business?
No business.
Anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Okay, now you